Welcome to Peas in a Podcast. What happened to you?
If you've ever thought, why didn't somebody tell me this before I started running a team? You are in good hands. Not us.
Each week we unpack the human stuff that makes or breaks a business without the corporate wank or the need for lozenges.
Croak in my throat. What are we talking about this week? I feel like we need a holiday.
I think that probably perfectly sums up the fact that we were like, do we mention that we were going on holiday soon and we're in holiday mode? I feel like that's already evident.
Yeah.
So we should just move on. But yes, we both got our I'm not going to say the word hollybobs. I hate that word. I don't know why I say it. Hollybobs.
You sound like your mum.
Oh, yeah. Coming up. Actually, I don't think I've ever heard my mum use that word. But yeah, we both got them coming up. You go first and then I go.
Yes.
But luckily the team are here.
Yes.
And so everything will run probably smoother.
Yeah. In our absence.
Yeah.
That tends to be the way it works.
And speaking of teams,
what are we talking about this week?
we are talking about team meetings. I was going to say the dreaded team meetings, but I think that depends on your perspective, doesn't it? How well inclined you are to have a team meeting, how much you enjoy them, or whether you actually have dread towards them.
I think what we're talking about is the principles of running an effective team meeting, which I think for us is really, really obvious. And I think the more work we do with clients, the more we realise that actually that's not always the view of perhaps some of our clients. And actually that kind of came out last week when we were running our final stage of Boss Mode Bootcamp, didn't it? Where we run an entire module around collective team performance.
Yes.
Having covered off throughout the entire rest of the course, every aspect of how individuals perform and are managed. And I think running effective meetings is a really key part of collective team performance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's essential. I do think it's obvious, but also ironic because, and this is where I want to give a kind of disclaimer, I feel like it's really obvious to us from our career history that where we were required to run really fast-paced meetings that were around high-volume projects. So we had to be really clear about what the meeting was all about, and we'll come on to that, and who needed to be part of it. And we were running multi-sites, so we needed to think about when to invite people from different sites. We were running different projects, so we needed to think about cross-functionality. I think it's a completely different ballgame when you're running a scaling business, and I would say it's probably something for us that we have consistently failed at from day one. And 10 years in, we're just starting to think about what type of meetings might be helpful here.
Which is ironic because I remember the last job I had before we started this role was working at the Students' Union.
Yeah.
And that's when I got introduced to Google Drive. I would literally just take my laptop from one room to another to discuss different projects that different people within my team and the entire union were working on.
Yeah.
And that was just literally the way of life there.
Yeah.
It was meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. Everything was collaborative. Everything was online, which was all new and shiny at the time.
Yeah.
We were updating documents and actions in live time. I'd just pick my laptop up, go to another room, sit with a different group of people, discuss a completely different project, open that. Yeah. So I used to be really good at it and really conditioned in that type of environment. And then,
I think it changes when it's your own business. And we see, and this happened within the last 2 weeks, businesses that have scaled through headcount beyond where we are in our smaller team to teams of kind of 50, 60, even more people. The top end of our kind of client avatar, if you like, where they've got almost 100 employees and they still haven't cracked this. And that's when you go, okay, this is something we absolutely have to get in. So it's really ironic for me that we actually advise it. We help people have these meetings really effectively. We know exactly the right ingredients, and you've experienced and I've experienced a time where it's worked really well. So well, it's almost become unconscious, like in your example, but it's something that in an SME environment and a micro business environment that we see consistently, even in our own, not work. And I think there's a load of reasons for that, probably mainly the time poor, and also every single head is creating revenue. So taking people away from the grind and putting them in a meeting almost feels like a bit of a luxury sometimes, depending on what that purpose that meeting is. But I
don't know. I think that I have a different approach. I think that companies are good at having meetings, but they're more like conversations and there's no structure around them. So they call them a meeting. but actually they completely lose the effectiveness of them because they're actually just a group of people having a conversation in a room together.
Yeah.
And that conversation isn't particularly constructive in the sense that it's not reviewing anything. It's not actually all the things that make up an effective meeting. But should we start talking about that?
Well, I think it's helpful to talk about it from the lens of what's not effective. It's not effective when people don't understand. Oh, excuse me.
You got the quickening phone.
Oh, what's going on? Excuse me. I think it's not effective when people don't know why they're there.
Yeah.
I think it's not effective when it becomes a groupthink scenario, when people are all just kind of vaguely, nebulously discussing a topic area and we're not really sure why, when there's no decision making, when the actions are rolled over from one meeting to another, when
not reviewed.
Yeah, not reviewed, not even captured sometimes. So no one's capturing the actions.
When it's impromptu, right? Like when it's just let's just get together and talk about this. When it's not planned, it's not structured.
But then I think there's real value in that as well, like your union example. I think sometimes the best meetings can be impromptu.
True.
But it comes back to that being clear about what the meeting is. If it's going to be an impromptu meeting, I'm having one today, for example. I came in with, I haven't put this in your diaries. I probably should have. We need to discuss 2 things. And I've made my own job harder because I'm going to have to go into the room and say, okay, these are the 2 things we're discussing. This is where I think we are. Can I first and foremost have an update from you on where you think we are? And then by the end of this meeting, can we do X, Y, and Z? Because I haven't done that piece around what the structure is going to look like, and no one's had papers in advance. Because obviously I come from the voluntary sector where this is done on steroids, and it's everyone's got a role, and decisions are made in line with terms of reference.
I was going to say it's terms of reference.
And papers have to be circulated before you can discuss anything. And that's not really my bag, but that is the world I was in just before Peas in a Pod. So you were there taking your Google Workspace computer from one to the others, and I was making sure everybody had circulated the fact that I needed a pee in the second half of the meeting, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be allowed to go. That is an exaggeration.
And I feel like there's probably something in between, right? Surely it's actually about the purpose of the meeting in terms of what's appropriate. And like you said, we can have impromptu meetings, but you've still put some structure around that.
Yes.
Yeah, you haven't given them much lead time to prepare for it. And to be fair, our team are very well versed in the lack of that from us. But the point being is there's still some structure, and actually what's appropriate at the time is dependent on what the meeting's for, what's going to be discussed, and what's the required outcome of it.
Yeah. And I think it's about what's most effective for the business. So whenever we do this for clients, which is probably where we do it best, we're always looking at what's fit for purpose for them in terms of meetings. So when we talk about collective performance, we're talking about performance indicators that sit outside of one person. So it might be that you have a group of individuals that are representing different functions of the business or different projects, but there is a need for those people to come together to understand a little bit about what's going on in each other's world so that they can fulfill that all important criteria of being interdependent as a team. And it's nice to do for lots of reasons. And we'll talk about the different purposes of a meeting, one of which could just be collaboration and connection and fun. But it's also really important strategically and commercially because it stops that right hand not knowing what the left hand's doing, duplication of work, gaps where things fall through, progress being stalled on certain projects because they never feel urgent, they never feel important, or they never feel significant, different people striding ahead without keeping other people informed. These are all huge inefficiencies that can be overcome by helpful, structured, meaningful, collective meetings with the right people around the table. And that's all productivity is. We say this over and over again in boss mode: right people, right place, doing right things at right time. And in that particular time, the right thing to do is to come together and fulfill whatever that meeting's purpose is.
Okay. All right. So how do managers get this right? How do they approach team meetings in a more effective way?
The first thing is to be really clear about the purpose. And the one that we see most commonly is information sharing and updates. And it's totally valid. You get to a point where you realize that you've got more than one person in the business. You need them to come together. You need them to be updating each other about their work. So you put some sort of update meeting in, whether it's a daily huddle, whether it's a weekly team meeting, whether it's a project meeting. And maybe it starts really good and you start to get some really new juicy information. But oftentimes we see these fail quite quickly, and these are the ones that start to feel pointless. They're the ones that employees will tell us are pointless.
I would go as far as saying that these are generally what most business managers only know to be the only purpose of a meeting. So like as though there couldn't be any other purpose for them. So All right. Okay. So, but they're necessary. They're the most common types of reasons that a team will have a team meeting.
Yeah, they're absolutely necessary, and they make sure that the business is informed across all levels.
Okay.
When they're done well. When they're not done well, or when they're mishandled, they start to feel mundane, pointless, and then the updates that are being shared aren't necessarily seen as relevant to all parties, or they're relevant to some parties, and others feel really aggrieved at having to give up half an hour of their day to be there because nobody spotted the fact that there's no relevance in them being there. It dominates by one key area of the business, and that immediately makes another part of the business feel inferior. There's so many things that can go wrong with the information update meeting when you don't consider why the meeting existed in the first place, and then shortly followed by who needs to be there, and then how often does it need to happen. That applies to all purposes when it comes to meetings, but it's probably most important in the information sharing meeting because it can so easily be disregarded as it didn't work because of one of those reasons or many others that I've just mentioned.
So I remember going into a client like 6 months ago, didn't we? And their senior leadership team meeting had started rolling on to plus 6 hours on
Oh my
Friday.
goodness, yes.
Like, no wonder you all look like you want to kill yourself. It's that, and they hadn't worked out why they were in that meeting. It had become really unconstructive and turned into a bit of a gripe session, hadn't it?
It had, but also I think that what became really clear after going in to sit into it, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we went in and actually you've got 14 managers. That's a lot of managers as it is. There were no cross-functional projects clearly delineated or outlined. So everybody's project became part of the order of business for that meeting, which means it's going to last that long. And because there was so much happening at that point without it being directly under the nose of the managing director, that what we established quite quickly was that the meeting served him more than anybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. He needed those updates, but that wasn't the forum for it.
No, and it was in absence of him having one-to-ones with those individuals, wasn't it? So
it became clear that was the case.
And it didn't respect people's time, did it? Because of that, and that's why the managers became pretty disillusioned with it quite quickly because he hadn't considered who he needed in that room or whether there was a better forum for that exchange of information that he needed to receive.
Yes, exactly that. We talk about collective performance and individual performance and making sure that under any performance framework, as we call it, which is just essentially the range of activities you do to make sure that performance is happening, underperformance is caught, and we're being proactive with optimizing it. In a team situation, it's a team meeting or a meeting of sorts. But actually, that's not to compensate for all the other activities that you can be doing, like project meetings, one-to-ones, chat channels, Slack channels. They're all activities that sit within a performance framework. And it's just been really clear about what serves what purpose. And the point you make about time is probably one of the most important when it comes to employee engagement levels. Employees who don't feel that you respect their time become really disengaged really quickly. So when you cancel one-to-ones, when you say you're going to take 2 hours and you take 4. I mean, I sit with clients as well, to be fair. If I say I'm going to take an hour for a meeting, I don't necessarily always take the hour, but what I will say is we're 5 minutes to the hour. Just checking that that's okay, or do we need to set a second meeting? Because it's about respecting the other person's time as being, important and valuable as a resource.
And we tend to find that when meetings aren't kept to time, you can generally attribute it to poor chairing skills of the meeting itself. Right. Or that chair didn't stand a chance in the first place because there wasn't a clear agenda.
Yeah.
And even if there was an agenda, it didn't dictate what's in scope and what's out of scope in terms of the information being disseminated, shared, discussed, fed back, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
With appropriate time milestones throughout that actual meeting.
Yeah.
And also, you're always going to have those people that like to go off on a tangent or like to deflect, like to be disruptive, like to use the meetings for their own personal agenda, or because they've made a decision that they're going to advocate on behalf of the entire team around everything that's been bothering them for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to the skill of the chair to be able to rein things back in, to keep things to time, to keep things to point, and to understand whether a meeting has gone off on a tangent or a discussion point has gone outside of the scope of the meeting agenda, and bring it back and stop it in its tracks.
Yeah.
And that's quite often why we find managers avoid that role, right?
Yeah, it is a skill set. And sorry, I was smirking there. So if anyone's watching this, it makes sense. But there was an ice cream van.
I didn't know it was the ice cream
It's all happening today. It really is. Yeah, there's loads of different points just within that last point that you've made. Yes, if you don't have a clear purpose, those things become more likely. If you haven't created some sort of structure around the meeting. So if it's a one-off meeting, you might only do a very quick, this is what we're here to discuss, this is what we need to agree by the end of it, and these are the people I need there. So it's a one-off meeting to discuss a one-off thing. If it's a meeting that you think you're going to need regularly, so I would always say a management meeting, I think there's some work that you can do up front to make your life easy as a chair. So thinking about agreeing in the first meeting what this meeting is, what it's going to be for, what it's not going to be for, but also how we would like to be together when we come and what your role is as a participant. So we're talking about all the different roles. Those are all things you can set out in the old voluntary sector. We used to call them the terms of reference, but that doesn't necessarily have to be as stuffy when you're talking about a micro business or a scale up. We're talking about this is the meeting, this is what it's for. It's almost like a one pager. And actually Amazon use this. So they're a really good example. They have their cross-functional meeting where they come to it, and for the first 10 minutes no one says anything, because they're not going to circulate loads of papers in advance, because that means someone has to prepare them, and that's inefficient. We've kind of moved past that anyway. They know what they're supposed to bring in advance. They come and they read a document in silence for 10 minutes, and that document will tell them what needs to happen in that meeting and what their contribution is. And then once they've read that, they start the meeting, because it doesn't take any more extra time. Somebody does prepare that, whatever that briefing is, but it's quite short, it's quite punchy, and it's actually quite an effective way of doing it and making sure everybody stays in line. So yes, you do need all of those skills as a chair in that role. In fact, you need a plethora of skills. It's not even just one skill set. You need to be able to facilitate, you need to be able to potentially mediate, you need to be able to set really clear boundaries, you need to be able to deal with detractors, you need to be able to manage emotion, you need to be able to hold space, to decide when to let conversations run, to decide when you need to bring them back, and that all depends on what the purpose of the meeting is in the first place. So it's no wonder managers avoid it. It's exactly like line management for me. People think they should be innately able to do it, and that's not true. It's a learnable, teachable skill.
I'm not sure managers avoid it. I don't think they understand it in the first place that they need to have all those skills
Possibly.
to get an effective team meeting right.
Yeah,
and I think as a result they bumble into them, and then they wonder why they start to go wrong.
Yes, or they don't wonder and they just blame the meeting in itself. Yeah. So then we're or the other people blame everybody else. I mean, I think it's really quite a tricky thing, and it's worth giving some intentional thought around. So whatever purpose of the meeting, we're talking about information sharing, but it's probably the one that goes wrong most often, to be fair, or becomes disregarded most often. Having all of that clear up top. So what this meeting is, what it's not, who's in it, who doesn't need to be in it, and also reviewing the effectiveness of the meeting with the people in it after a certain amount of time. We're going to have this meeting for 6 weeks, and then in 6 weeks' time, we're going to make a note in the calendar that the first part of the meeting is going to be dedicated to a conversation about whether this meeting is actually helpful or whether we need to tweak the structure in some way to be able to keep it live. People who want to cling on to meetings for the sake of clinging on to meetings, it's usually because it's serving them more than anybody else, when actually the other people aren't getting what they need from it. So is there something different they could be doing instead that doesn't take time from everybody's calendars? Because meetings are expensive. We talk about our example where we've got a meeting that's running on for 6 hours with 14 managers on very good, generous salaries. That's an expensive meeting. And I'm always shocked when I go into SLT meetings that the managing director hasn't considered that. When we're talking about how much you're invested, how much this meeting costs you, is it worth it? Or is there a different way you could be doing this if you were to use different technology or different forums?
I think there's also something that we haven't covered here around my biggest frustration is when meetings aren't action orientated.
Yeah.
As in nobody, there's no ownership. You know what I'm like about accountability as it is, but everybody just discusses things and then walks away to their respective job roles. So you can have a meeting that's well structured, kept to time, and relevant. But if there's no actions being taken from it, if nobody has to do anything as a result of the conversations, and I can't imagine many meetings where you don't need to take away some sort of action from them, that's the most frustrating thing for me. Yeah. So not setting actions, or then you do see them setting actions, and but then what you don't see is any time in the agenda for the following meeting to review those actions and to impose that accountability on the people that have taken the actions to update their progress against them.
Yeah. And it's, you're right. It's very, very rare that you'll have a meeting that doesn't have any actions come out of it. And that, again, is another thing we see a lot of people fall foul, or where you're not reviewing it. And that gives you another opportunity to manage performance, which as a manager, any opportunity that you've got, you want to make the best of it and use it. But you made the point about saying that's frustrating for you. And that's an entirely valid perspective, because it's yours, for one. So it's always valid to have your own perspective and your own, but we're bringing our own motivators into these meetings. And I think that's something that, again, fails to be acknowledged, that people come to meetings for different reasons. Now, if I, for example, as a person who has a preference for collaboration, discussion, ideation, creative, innovative, let's exchange ideas, let's talk it out, let's chew it out, that's my preference. My preference isn't the action-orientated meeting. I can do it. I have no problem with it. But if no one's told me that's what that meeting is for, I'm going to feel disappointed when I come into the meeting that I haven't been given that airtime, or the team hasn't been given that airtime. So again, it comes back to, as a manager, understanding that people step into the room with different motivators. Some, like yourself, will want to build momentum, build accountability, make sure actions are assigned, make sure people understand that they have a role. You will want people to be paying attention. If there's information that's really crucial, that's business critical, that you want them to share, those meetings are essential and really, really important. What's equally essential is to let people know that this won't be the forum for that discussion. So when we see agendas being created, and we fall foul of this ourselves, you almost try and pack too much into an agenda. So if we're trying to get people to turn up and their participatory role is to listen, pen and paper at the ready, give punchy answers, and make sure that the actions are logged and that they have their own ones taken away and they're ready to spur into action. Brilliant. If we haven't told them that, they'll turn up ready to chat, ready to see how their colleagues are, potentially if they're differently motivated, ready to hopefully hear something interesting about the business. They might be wanting a little bit more of a backstory that they don't get. So they'll then switch off or start to detract from the meeting purpose, because they want to get their motivators met. Everybody's human instinct is to get their needs met. So that's when we see the detractors start to pop up, because they'll be like, well, I want to get this meeting back to where I want it to be. So what's really interesting about us is we've had those types of meetings where I've gone in thinking one thing's happening, you've got in thinking another, and one of us has come out frustrated completely naturally because we haven't actually gone in and gone, right, this is what we need today to be all about. So we're talking about this as though it's really obvious.
What's really funny is we've come out frustrated. Our team have come out damn confused.
I mean, standard. Yeah, but we've seen it happen. Like we're coming at this from, we know what good looks like over a long period of time and from helping clients to get it right. But it's actually really quite difficult to turn it inward on your own business, because you're just so focused on what you're doing that you don't think about how it's coming off or what other people's experience might look like. So that's the whole point of being clear on the purpose, because we don't want people to come in feeling like they haven't got clear expectations of what's going to happen, that they don't know what role they have to play, and they don't know what they're there to do. Equally, if we only have meetings like that, it's a bit like our Goldman's leadership styles that we've talked about. For the people who are motivated by something different, they will feel increasingly disillusioned that their motivators aren't met, and they're constantly having to dig deep in what I would call the bottom of their motivational map. They're coming to have these meetings. So I would feel in that situation that first for you, I'd be like, this is good. Yeah, we're action orientated. And then I would start to feel really stifled and really and start to disengage from those meetings quite quickly, in the absence of, not necessarily within that meeting, because we don't want to build the agenda out till it's massive to include all the different purposes, but in the absence of any other forums to connect, collaborate, share ideas, understand lessons learned, wash up on things that have gone wrong, for example. My motivators won't be sparked, and that's the case. That might be the case for somebody else as well. So it really depends. Some people come to a meeting wanting to learn something. Some will come wanting to connect with their colleagues. Some will come wanting to take action. Some won't want to be there at all. That's a whole other issue, and potentially a performance concern. Some people who are motivated by stability, security, and predictability will want the same agenda every time, and that might not be possible. So we have to have that conversation with them. Some people want more information than other people. Some people will just get an executive summary and they're ready to go in the meeting. Others will want to know much more about what you're going to be making decisions on. Is there a decision-making role there for them to play? Or actually, is this a briefing? And actually, we don't want your voice. We don't want you. That's valid. It's valid to ask people to come to a meeting to hear without participating.
And like you said, it's just about being really, really clear around expectations
Yeah.
and purpose from the outset, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
that's an hour before or a week.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And then knowing as a manager that you have the right, if you have been clear and you have told people what they can expect and what you need from them, and then they do detract, that you are within your rights to bring them back on track, whilst also respecting the fact that they might not have had their needs met from that meeting, and then catching up with them maybe afterwards to say, what happened there? Like, did you think we were going to be discussing something that wasn't happening? There still could potentially be, we find the people that come in because they want to be the mouthpiece for everyone, the person who decides that any other business, which I'm here to say I would not have an any other business category on your agenda if I was you, but those people they come in, they're like, yes, I have a list of 20 things I want to discuss, and everyone else
3 minutes before the meeting's due to
is
end.
immediately pissed off with them. You get to manage that within the meeting setting and say, we're going to take that offline, or that's not for today.
Yeah.
You get to do that. That's being a good chair.
Yeah.
Boundaries.
I think there's also something that we haven't talked about that's really important around accessibility.
Yes.
So we've talked as though every meeting is face to face, and there's obviously a lot of workplace environments where team meetings are run remotely.
Yeah.
And actually, the considerations around accessibility and enabling people, where one of the purposes of the meeting is to enable people to participate and share views or feedback. It's about that consideration around consideration to the participants involved to make sure that they can do that in the best way, taking into account any personal needs or potential neurodivergencies, for example, or anything similar that might prohibit somebody from being able to participate. And I think that's a key point.
Yeah.
And it's funny because what you've talked about makes it sound quite a psychologically complex thing to get right, and then you add accessibility considerations on top of that in the world we're in and the way we operate. It's no wonder that we see team meetings go wrong quite often.
No, exactly. And we've talked about the fact that it's gone wrong in our own business, and I wouldn't want managers to be beating themselves up, because it's part of one of the fundamentals for psychological safety. We talked about that on a previous podcast. So you're creating space and safety for people to come together, whether that is in person or remote. And I was chuckling slightly because we've seen all of the different reels and posts on social media where people have been at the beach on their online meetings. So you have a whole host of other difficulties when you're chairing either a hybrid meeting, which I would say is the hardest. I'd say if I'm safely in remote camp, that's one thing. We can pull on certain tips and hacks, if I could speak, to get people engaged and not checking their emails at the same time, again, by being really clear about what the rules are and expectations are around that meeting. And if you're in person, you can obviously pick up on so much more nuance because you've got the body language and all the stuff we talk about. But when you're hybrid, trying to create parity, which is really important for psychological safety. So by that I mean people are able to express as they wish to, as they feel safe to, their views and exchange them. So you haven't got dominating people who are taking 90% of the conversation. As a effective chair, you have to sense when people want to contribute. We've got that in Boss Mode Bootcamp, knowing when people are about to take themselves off mute so that you can really encourage them to speak is more difficult when you're running remote. It's even more difficult when you're trying to absorb both those sets of information at the same time, both make sure you've got the people on the screen. And we run hybrid training, and I'm so glad in that situation where there are both of us in the room, because oftentimes you'll say to me, oh, I think so-and-so on the screen wanted to chat, he's come off mute or whatever, and I've missed it.
Yeah.
Not because I'm not looking for it, but because I've just got 100 other things to think about as well as delivering the content. So it is really complicated.
And if you add on top of those facilitation challenges some individual performance issues, some potential conduct issues, where you have got that one employee who's been slightly aggrieved for the best part of 7 months and you haven't managed to resolve it, and they're using the team meetings as an opportunity to demonstrate quite how pissed off they are, then that's an added challenge as well. You're trying to deal with a potential conduct issue in an appropriate way in a forum that involves other people as well as all those other facilitation considerations.
Yeah, and actually that's where the phrase "we'll take that offline, that's not for this meeting" is your gold standard kind of phrase that you want to be able to lean back on, because you never want to be going into a power struggle or a back and forth with one single employee with an audience of 10 others. It's it's not good for anybody.
It's making sure people do take it offline as well, that managers do. There's nothing worse than a manager walking away for a team meeting, for me, where somebody has been disruptive within it, and a manager acknowledges the observed behaviours that they picked up on. So whether it's, like you said, with body language, or it's rolling eyes, crossing arms, interrupting, deliberately putting other people down. We've seen it all. Managers have seen it all. And they're not addressing that afterwards as a conduct concern. I mean, arguably, you have the right to stop people being in a team meeting if they cannot behave professionally within it.
Yeah.
And then that becomes an issue to deal with, like you said, outside of the team meeting.
Yeah.
So that would probably be my biggest kind of tip. I mean, I'm always going to come at it from this perspective.
Yeah, it's
but
valid.
making sure that you address those types of conduct concerns.
Yeah.
Immediately following a team meeting where somebody has become disruptive. I think it's key.
Yeah, and it's such good advice as well, because I think one of the things I hear you often say is with people who have got an underperformer or somebody that's who's behaving in quite a toxic way, their fear is often, but what if they do that in a meeting? And you go, well, they've handed you another conduct issue, and then that light bulb comes on. So I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are some of the key takeaway points for getting this right?
Key takeaway points: purpose, purpose, purpose. Start with why, always. So why are you having the meeting? Who needs to be there? What are you going to talk about? When are you going to have it wrapped up by? It's a good old who, what, where, why, when. Make sure you've thought that through and then communicated it to people so that they understand what their role is and what they can expect, so that they don't walk away disappointed. I would suggest that you need a blend of purposes, or at least, and they don't all have to be regular. So you don't have to have a fun meeting once a week and a functional meeting once a week. Have them when is needed, but make sure you do have those opportunities involving people in decision making and being able to create feedback loops is commercially really, really smart. So if you can't do that in a briefing meeting, fine, find another meeting to do it, or find another forum. It doesn't even have to be a meeting to do it, whatever that might be. So don't ignore and just default to information update. There might be a decision-making meeting needed. There might be an ideation meeting needed. There might be a wash-up meeting needed. And there'll be various one-off project meetings, and that's fine. Don't let them outlive themselves. If you only need it to happen once or twice, have it once or twice. So kill a meeting if you can kill a meeting, and don't let them run any longer than they need to. Really, I say an hour tops for any meeting. If it's taking longer than that, you've probably got too many people in it. So when you're thinking about how you want the meeting to be, the other thing I would say is, I'm always going to wang on about values. If you need a charter for how you're going to be together, have it. Agree how you want to have conflict meaningfully. We haven't mentioned that. I can't believe we haven't mentioned that yet, but we talk about conflict a lot. Exchanging ideas is essential to commitment. So how would you like that to happen? And how long are you going to give people to air it? So making decisions around how long you want to let those conversations run for in terms of airtime before you're going to take it offline, I think is something that managers can be mindful about. Dynamics, I think, is probably the other one. It is your role to manage the dynamics. We've talked about the various different roles that managers have. Don't be afraid to delegate them. You don't always have to chair just because you're the line manager. All right, we might like a bit of power as a line manager. You might want to run the first two. There is a development opportunity and waiting there for your team to hand off timekeeping, if you don't want to have to do that at the same time, to hand off note taking and action taking to make sure it happens, to even hand off chairing to the right person. If somebody is better than you at it, let them do it. Doesn't say anything about your credibility as a line manager. In fact, I would suggest and argue that surrounding yourself by people that are better at you than stuff is probably one of the strongest leadership moves you can make. So if somebody is a good chair, let them chair. Create some kind of structure.
Yeah, and I think progress. Like you said, even if it's not an action orientated meeting, it needs to progress in some way. The conversations need to progress. Because otherwise you're just having that Groundhog Day of having the same conversation over and over again.
Yeah, that's when to kill it.
Forum. Yeah. So making sure that it progresses in some way, whether that's through actions that are reviewed or whether that's a project that is agreed in terms of how it moves forwards.
Yeah. And I think probably my biggest message would be around that acceptance that everybody is different, not just from a motivational perspective, but from a needs perspective, that you will find that some people process faster than others, with or without neurodiversity. If you're introvert, you prefer to process behind the scenes and then say something when you've got something to say. If you're extrovert, you prefer to chew something over. People are going to want different things from the meetings. And I think consulting people to understand if you're sensing disengagement, checking in on people is really important to make sure that you are meeting their needs. And obviously that becomes even more important if there's an adjustment that's needed for somebody, if they need to know what's being discussed ahead of time, or you can circulate something in advance. I think respecting people's individuality is always going to be something that is necessary. But also, again, this is about efficiency and helping people work together so that you can recognize the exponential benefits of a team that works well. And they are exponential.
And enablement and efficiency are going to come hand in hand, aren't they?
Yeah.
Enable people, you'll make them more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm late for a meeting on that note, like literally 25 minutes.
The irony.
So sorry to the team. But...
So that's it for this week. Let's wrap it up.
Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your network and follow us on our socials at PieApp Consulting.
Join us next time. And until then, remember, people problems don't fix themselves.
And healthy cultures never happen by accident. See you next Tuesday.